Hi. There's a ton of stuff in here, so I'm trying not to break anything. So when Ben was concerned that there might be fire in the States, this is the point when it might happen, because there's a lot of things. So yeah, a bit about myself. Ben did a great introduction, but yeah, basically I've been doing lots of things as a creative technologist, as a technical director. I just like to say I'm a web developer because that's basically what I am. I don't have any other training, but I've been tinkering with lots of technologies and always looking at what's new, what's exciting, and how can things on the web platform be used and exploited. So let's see if this works. Okay, great. Okay, two confessions. First, so I usually do talks with lots of code, lots of JavaScript, lots of sometimes live coding, sometimes lots of lines of small unreadable code. And I thought this time I was going to do something different. So I was going to use more drawings, and I could draw them myself. It sounded like a good idea at the moment. So then the things that I used to have lots of tools for drawing, pencils, pens, and brushes and everything, but since I have two kids, I don't know what those tools are anymore. And the ones that I can find are completely useless. So yeah, so what I've done is painting the drawings on a small notebook, and I've scanned them with my phone. Uploaded to Google Photos, downloaded on my computer, adjusted them from brightness, and then uploaded to Google Slides. So yeah. Yeah, yeah. So a small tip: the drawings on your notepad, when they get blown out on the screen, they're going to look a bit rough, but it's okay. So the second confession is that when I was thinking about this talk, I thought by this time I would have finished a project that would allow me to tell about, explain a lot of interesting stuff, which was supposed to be launched in January, but it's been delayed, and it's not out yet. So all that information, it's just not there. So I'll try to explain. So the thing is that I don't want to talk about the API. I don't want to talk about the specifics of the JavaScript or the programming interface for WebVR. First, because it's going to change a lot, and most people don't really have to deal with that layer. There's frameworks and there's libraries, and there might be lots of improvements on browsers regarding that. But this is all very, very new, very experimental, and it's also, most of it still under discussion and being with spec under development. Okay, so there's been lots of this kind of revivals or looks backs in the previous talks, so I'm going to go fast through them. As we said, we began with very basic, with bulky computers, a browser that could display text, some very basic images, and then people went crazy creating their own web rings, their own online communities. They populated them with animated GIFs, rollovers. That was the biggest thing ever. Then a decade passed, and then we started having Flash. Browsers started having plugins like ActiveX or even Java applets. We saw the rise of the Web 2.0, new applications with amazing JavaScript and new APIs like Google Maps or Google Search Instant or YouTube. And now we get to the point in which we've seen the mobile web, all these devices connected everywhere, the rise of the web as a cohesive platform connecting everyone in the world, web apps or native apps, things that start mixing, and the second coming of WebVR. Since the 90s, in the 90s there was this wave of virtual reality. It wasn't really working. It was slow, it was heavy, it was just not good enough for consumers. Then we gave it a reboot at the beginning of around 2012. So, the present, after all this, what we have today, if we look at the web, we have all these things, all these APIs, all these features, Canvas, rich media, responsive design, as something that you have to consider when creating web pages. WebAssembly, I don't know, all these things, all these amazing technologies that sometimes make you go a bit like this when you try to start something. Like, where do I start? Why do I need all this? So WebVR, it's another of that family of interesting features that might need a bit of understanding. Because if it works, if it really sticks, it's going to change basically everything that we know about the web and what we know about our mobile devices and what we know about connection with people. OK, so virtual reality. VR, the VR web, and WebVR, which are different things, and they're a bit difficult to separate. I'm going to do a demo. So Ben, time to shine. OK, so first thing. So as always, show hands. How many people have tried bacon?
Twice.
Good, good. Twice. Oh, that line. How many people have tried cardboard-based virtual reality? OK. Daydream-based virtual reality? Ooh. And now the big gun. How many people have tried Vive or Rift-based virtual reality? I think we are more or less the same people with everything. How many people haven't tried anything at all? OK, OK. OK, good. So, OK, take this. So now it's one of those times that I need to switch to the other screen, OK? And then I need to take this. This is very complicated. So for everyone that doesn't know how this works, there's two stations. I also use lasers in my presentations. Yeah, smaller lasers, and I can look at them. So yeah, they're basically scanning very quickly the whole area. And those devices, the HMD, the head-mounted display, and the controllers, which are charging here, they have a series of sensors. And by cleverly timing when each sensor is activated based on the sweep of the laser, they know they can extract a pose in this volume. OK. Man. OK, so this is working. I'm going to start nightly. OK, Firefox nightly. I'm going to open the console because for some reason, I need to have the console open to run this. You can put your headset then.
Cool. See you later.
So I'm going to open a web page from one of my experiments. And supposedly, I should be able to enter VR.
What was that?
That's the thing. So you have to be aware that it's very, very immersive, and they don't realize this. I'm gonna start the metables. Can you see? Well, I think it's a bit too dark. I'll have a brighter one. Anyway, he's seeing that page and he's interacting. Does it feel like? How does it feel, Ben?
Yeah, no, this feels like awesome. So, yeah, it's like. I can't really describe how it is. Like, so I've used the Vive quite a lot, but it's like this is just brilliant. I've lost my words.
That's the problem, that you have to actually. It's like the Matrix. Nobody can explain to you.
Yeah.
How it is. So you have to try it. But this is the best thing that we can have. So yeah. OK, you can remove the headset now. OK. Cool. Oh, good. No motion sickness or anything. OK. So the same website. That it's running on Firefox Nightly with this, that is rendering with WebGL. I can have it running on a Daydream and on a cardboard. And this is going to be a bit more difficult to show because you cannot stream from, I mean, you can stream, but it was a bit difficult. So I have so this is a Pixel. It has to be powered down because if I have it on with WebVR, the battery doesn't last a lot. So sorry. OK. Good. So I opened Chrome Canary in this one, so a different kind of browser. It's you can see the same website still. So I'm going to put it on this, hopefully. Crap. Enter VR. I remove the controller.
Cool.
Should be like this. OK, so this is a controller that it's connected with Bluetooth. It should be connected to, OK, there we go. Does it work? Awesome. So, OK, try it. And how does it feel compared to the?
Cool. So, yeah, I've done quite a lot of cardboard, and this is like just a lot more responsive. Like, there's no, like, it updates really quickly when you're moving around. That feels brilliant.
So that's the same web page running on different devices, which are fundamentally very different. So it's getting there. It's getting there. So it's interesting. There's the same thing for cardboard. So I'm going to explain now all these different things. Thanks, Ben.
OK, no worries.
Can we switch back to the main? OK. So what's the idea of VR, of virtual reality, on any of these devices, on any of these platforms, regardless of where it is? So you take the position information from the head-mounted display. It gives you an algebraic representation. It's a matrix with rotation and translation. You update your virtual camera, wherever it's representing your head in your scene. It doesn't matter how you draw that scene, how you hold it, but somehow you really update that value, and then render the scene in stereo, left and right eyes, with that virtual camera, and then send that image to this display, that display. And if you do it fast enough and accurately enough, and you do it very quickly, 60, 75, 90 times a second, then this sensation, the feel of presence, of being there, it's absolute, and then it can be called virtual reality because it replaces completely your sensation of where you are. As long as you're missing something, like not the right size of rendering, not accurately tracking the information, or having some latency, the illusion is shattered, and possibly you get motion sickness, which is this code. You try VR, catch motion sickness, throw up, and finally lay it down. This will work. There's a global variable called barf. It's global because it leaks in the whole scope. So yeah, you have to be aware with that, especially with the limitations of the platform. So the evolution of WebVR, the WebVR API. So when we got the first idea for this was the Oculus DK1. And for using it in a browser, we would use the Oculus Bridge, which was a native server running through a WebSocket, and we would use that to know the information, the position of the headset. For phone, we would be using the device orientation event, and then we would be able to draw in stereo inside and put it right in front of our face with this. This is a second generation cardboard. It does have a nice button. The first generation had a magnetic, like a magnet button, which wouldn't actually be read easily by the browser. So we had to wait for this to actually have some interaction in the web. This brought the idea of that there should be this responsive VR concept. So we realized that we were creating code that was running in desktop browser with one specific way of getting information and another way of doing it in a mobile phone, accessing the device orientation. So it's like, can we merge it somehow? Can we make it so we don't have to replicate almost similar code in different ways? So the boilerplate project started, which is the WebVR polyfill, which will provide always a standard display. If you have something that can work as VR, it will give you a VR display. If it doesn't, it will give you a keyboard and a flat screen. But you can always use the same code path and then submit a frame to that, because it's not a polyfill in the sense of most polyfills provide the same features as the API. This provides way more. And the WebVR Manager, it's a complete library which will give you detection and enter and exit VR and lots of nice things. So then we got to WebVR 1.0, almost the present, with lots of effort on trying to unify in the same concept of make it like a responsive VR solution. All the new different HMDs, the new Rift, the new Vive, the Samsung Gear VR, which works with a phone, Samsung phone. Lots of changes that were done at the platform level, like sensor fusion for Android, which gives more accurate readings and doesn't have any drift. Cardboard SDK, it improved and gave more and better native support. And then more controllers, because we started having new ways of interacting with virtual stuff. Like the gaze, you look at something and it reacts after a certain time. It's like simulating a click, or you actually have a click in your device. You can use a lip motion if you're familiar with that, or the Gamepad API, because you can connect a game controller. And right now, the current situation is WebVR 1.1. The intention is to stabilize completely the support for all the available HMDs. And on all the platforms, right now it's Windows and Android. It's a bit, so it's a bit, the situation of the support, I'll talk about later, it's a bit tricky because there's many parts, but it will get better. And integrate more controllers. It was obvious that the Gamepad API wasn't exactly the appropriate solution for input controllers on VR, because it's not everything it's a game controller. Like this one, for instance, sorry. The design, it was obviously originally your traditional console gamepad, but you suddenly start having like separate rotations, or people have new devices, or the Vive tracker, the Vive bug, which is something that you can attach to an object and then track it inside this virtual volume. Okay, so I'm going to try to explain very quickly what are all the variations and possibilities. If you are interested in starting WebVR, it's a very wide spectrum of support, so it's important to have some concepts right. So, from the most basic thing, you can render your scene in like a camera, like your regular video game, like your regular WebGL page. It's called Magic Window, usually because when you track the position with your device orientation, it looks like you're looking through a magic window into a virtual world. Then we have the stereo rendering, which is the one that properly gives you 3D perception. One of the keys that our brain uses to interpret depth and three-dimensionality. So you can have it undistorted through the polyfill. So the polyfill provides you this, like a separate render. It works kind of okay, it's performant, but it doesn't work well when you have lenses on your viewer. So you basically, to make it correct, you have to compensate for the lens distortion, but that costs a CPU or GPU. So you can choose not to do it for very low-end phones. You can, through the polyfill, you can have actually vertex or fragment shader-based distortion, and it works at the cost of making it slower, so you might only use it on high-end phones. And on the, I don't know why this is moved, by the way. Sorry, anyway. And the same thing can be done in stereo, lens distorted with native, which is what you get with Daydream. Daydream, it's the support on devices like the Pixel XL on Android 7.7 that gives you better tracking, gives you a low persistence display, gives you lots of things. And it's designed to be working with the Daydream viewer and the Daydream controller, which is here. OK, so what can you do? What can you build with this? You can start from sorry, no, you will know. How do you control the camera, that virtual camera? You can use your mouse and keyboard. You can use touch on your devices to rotate the camera. It's not linked to your position, but it works as the lowest level of support. You can have 3 degrees of freedom tracking, which is the one that Cardboard and Daydream provides, which means that you can rotate, but you cannot move. It's enough for most people. It's a bit disconcerting when you notice that you're moving and nothing's actually moving in the world. And then you got the 6 degrees of freedom, or also called room scale tracking, which is this one. And then you can actually move around and teleport and do all kind of things. Solutions for this, the 3 degrees of freedom constraints, are inventing new locomotion systems, like pointing at somewhere and transporting. But it's problematic because you're not supposed to be moving the camera of the user without their collaboration, because that creates motion sickness. Then how do you actually handle interactions? How do you, once the user is in the VR world, how do you react? How do you interact with it? So same thing. You still can have your keyboard, your touch. The viewer has a button. The controller has also a button or a trackpad, so you can have like analog values. And then you have a controller. That's also wrong. Crap. Anyway, so any controller, like the Oculus Touch or anything that they might invent, and then you can use your regular gamepad API, speech API on the browser. You can use, that goes there, TCP or Bluetooth, like WebSockets, anything that allows you to connect something with your device. OK, so how does it work? So imagine the most basic thing you can have is a magic window with a keyboard and mouse or touch or device orientation. OK, what does that mean? The same code runs on a browser with no VR features. You can still look around by dragging, or you can use it on a tablet or a touch device by moving with your finger. Next thing, you can use a mobile or cardboard viewer. In the first generation, you would use this look, wait, there would be a spinner, and then you would actuate on something. Or with the second generation, you can actually press. Look at something, press. So you've got that action. Next, you've got the mobile with Daydream or Gear VR, in which you can still render in stereo very nicely. Ben was trying. You can look around, and you have a way of interact like natively. Or with the control, you can actually rotate and point at things. So it builds on top of that. It's the kind of this progressive enhancement with interactions. The sitting experience, which would be the original Oculus Rift experience, in which you have also nice stereo rendering. You've got tracking, but it's basically one camera. You're sitting. You've got a 180 range. You can look backwards, but usually there's nothing there. And then you can interact with controllers. You're sitting, usually. So those are like flight simulators, racing simulators. And then you've got the room scale, which is this one. This is stereo rendering on the HMD, very fast, connected to a computer, the tracking system on a volume, and the controllers, which let you 6 degrees of freedom everywhere. So in reality, what does this mean? We have ways of connecting to provide this content really quickly. I only have 7.5 minutes left. Jesus. So, no, seriously. So, Firefox Nightly has support for Vive and Rift on Windows, because basically the vendors of VR, the Rift and the Vive, only provide support for now for Windows. And with Chromium, with a custom build of Chromium, you can also run WebVR content on those two devices. On mobile, you've got on iOS, you've got the polyfill. The polyfill will provide in any case, will provide for you. I'm sorry for iOS users, because it's the worst of the experiences in all this range, but it works. You can still do things. It's a bit tricky with the full screen concept that iOS have. It's very opinionated on that, especially on iOS 10. On Android, you have the polyfill. It will always work. And then you have Daydream on Pixel. And there's this thing in between, which is a bit disconcerting. That it's, so if I take my Nexus 5 and run a WebVR website, I will get the polyfill, because it doesn't have native WebVR support. But with Chrome 57, which is rolling out right now, if you have the VR services installed, you go to the Play Store and install VR services, it's an optional install, you will get native Daydream-like support in your Chrome. And it's much nicer than the polyfill. Samsung Gear VR, they have their own thing. They have their Samsung browser, and Oculus is working on a browser that it's called Caramel. OK. I'm going to skip this scenario. I'm going to talk about WebVR rollout. So basically, you can do two things. So to get started, you can go to your Chrome flags or your Firefox flags and enable VR. Or there's this thing. How many people are familiar with Origin trials? OK, Origin trials is a way that Chrome has to provide new and experimental APIs without you having to download an experimental or nightly or weird build. It's this stable branch. You just have to apply for a token that you put on your web page. It's like a meta tag that will give you that will enable those APIs for a limited period of time. Usually, it's about not even a month, I think. So that way they can, if they detect that this is being successful or it's creating problems, they can disable the origin trial and nothing wrong will happen. It's a better way. Because people, like developers, will telling users, actual users, to download experimental builds of Chromium. So how is this done? So this is done with WebGL. That's the crux of the thing. So you have to build it with JavaScript. You have to build it with WebGL, as it is right now. That would mean that if you look at the support of WebGL, you might do everything with ES6. But since you might be using the polyfill, you might have to consider the AS5 path. So from the perspective of deploying and delivering content and bundling and things like that, all these solutions that we've been talking these past days still apply. So in the end, it's still a web page. It's like any other website. So same thing. You're downloading assets. In this case, besides images and sound and text in the DOM or in a file, you've got 3D files, and there's new formats for 3D files. So there's, for instance, there's GLTF. It's the JPEG of the 3D web. You've got compressions, same thing. And also, the same techniques apply because, again, you're still building a website. The only thing is that you're not using the DOM, in which I will get in a second if I have time. So you can still make it progressive. You can add it to home screen. So all these things are coming together. So you can have like a really native experience from. This is specifically talking about mobile. The desktop path is still needs a bit of development. So if you want to check all these things, if you want to code on imperative, like coding with JavaScript, you've got all these resources. You might work directly with WebGL or with 3JS or with Babylon. If you want something declarative, there's A-Frame or React VR or XFreedom, which basically it's you build your experience with DOM, and that will run through an engine that is built on top of 3JS, and it will run your scene. So you can declare all your entities with your traditional kind of web component approach. There's lots of tools which let you build directly in the web. There's editors, and there's things like Sketchfab that you can upload models and you can browse them in 3D, in VR, ArcLogic for architectural representation, also in VR. Janus VR, it's like a social platform. So one thing about content. Okay, I'm getting right. So this is important because we've been talking about all these things about the how things are, how things should be, how the skeuomorphism. So there's this problem with creating WebVR content, or VR content in general, but WebVR it's very limited because it comes from the web that it was basically text or blocks of text with images. And it's very tempting to bring that directly translated into the VR space. So you have to think what the thing that you're trying to replicate was supposed to be originally. So we were saying the web, it's supposed to be a book, for instance. So do you want to bring the flat page, or do you want to bring a book into VR? Because you can. Does it make sense? I don't know. Maybe you should try it and see, like, I don't know if I want to browse pages through flicking pages, but buttons, what are buttons? Are like this weird thing that it's on a screen that you click. Does it make sense in real life? There's buttons in real life, but shouldn't there be something better? Like, you don't have to think that the button in a web page is the limiting factor. The button in real world, it's the limiting factor because it's already a compromise with what cannot be. So you want to try to break free from those limitations and think new ways that relate to what the action it's actually about. So you can bring that familiarity into VR. Okay, and so possible becomes possible, and the possible is just the beginning, basically, because everything can be done in here, and then that's the important part. It's insane how few time I have. So. No, there's no time for a demo, but it's sad because I wanted to throw things at you. It's okay if I explain the future just very quickly? Yeah. Okay, so there's more APIs. There's a ton of technology being developed because this is an insanely hot topic. So WebVR 2.0, and that's why it didn't show any code, because it's going to be brand new, it's going to be awesome, it's not going to be WebVR 2.0, but it's not going to be backwards compatible. So don't have to worry, because there will be frameworks doing all the heavy lifting for you. Then we have the augmented reality and mixed reality with things like HoloLens or Tango, and the OpenXR, which is the initiative to create this cross-platform portable virtual reality. And this is really good, because it's going to merge all the different libraries, game platforms, vendors, headset into one viable platform. WebVR-specific challenges. Performance, of course, this is something that the vendors are aware, and they're working every day a lot. So every release of the browser, it's more performant and faster. Bringing the UX and UI into VR, because right now you cannot do most of things like permissions or like enabling geolocation or activating your speech from inside our VR page. And they have to do that first. And it's going to be a flat label in front of you until we figure out something better. Road to WebVR 2.0, it's going to be insane, because we have to figure out everything. Everything has to be figured out. Community support, and let me get to the actual important thing. So, these new metaphors. Everything's new. We have to break out from the old definitions that define the web. And we're doing that by not even having the DOM, not even having CSS, which is a big deal for many people. So, because how do you want to build that? Do you want it to build with JavaScript? Do you want to bring something that looks like DOM, so all web developers that are really familiar with that can bring lots of content very quickly? That's an interesting and important choice. How do you traverse a link? How do you follow one page in VR to another page in VR? What happens in between? Right now, it just drops out of VR, you go in, and then you start again VR. Firefox has figured out that lately, and it's still being experimented, but we don't know if there has to be like a construct in which you wait for the page to load, or you just see an empty space, or you keep the old page. So all these things are going to be new. Accessibility is huge with this, because how do you, if you consider about all these things with colorblind and epileptic attacks, imagine with people not entirely body-abled in VR, if you think, okay, you have to have a controller, but you don't have hands. So all these things have to be VR. They're increasingly complex in this responsive or an extensible side. So that's it. That was the thing, like the new web page, the new thing. When we bring AR and VR into this browser, the browser, as Peter said, will disappear. Right now we're used to thinking the tab, it's the page, and what is there, it's there. Now we have to start thinking, when you have an AR browser, things will be just in a common space. So we have to start defining a platform that allows for interoperability and actually bringing code from one page into another page. So that browser, even if it's built with Servo, it's another Chromium, it's someone else, it deprecates everything that we know. We don't know it. It will have to provide space for pages, as we will know them, to interact all together in the same space. So that's it. This is some more info if you are interested. Some good links to get started. There's a way to get started. The cool stuff. That's the best way to try it. Thank you. Questions? I'll be around here. That's it.
That's great. Cool.